I would like to welcome you to the Family Life Forum, and this is the month of June. Yay! We have our whole year filled up this year, so I'm starting to fill in people for next year. So if you have someone that you know of that would be a good speaker on a topic that we would really benefit from, then just let me know, and I'll contact them and get them signed up for next year. I would like to welcome Siquem Bustillos. Did I say your name right? Okay, kind of, close. And I'm really excited about this topic because I love gardening. I love just being outside and being in touch with the earth and seeing things grow. So, the topic today is Rooted in Connection, the Social Power of Gardening and Community. And so, Siquem's family has little darling boys. So he says here, from little hands to wise hearts. Discover how gardens grow more than plants. They grow connection, care, community. A family-friendly exploration of how gardening connects us to nature, to each other, and to something greater. Okay, so we know quite a bit about you because your parents come here to church. And they think that both of you guys are amazing, and you are. But let me just tell you a little bit about Siquem. He has a passion for service and has led local and international projects focused on education and health equity. He holds an MPH in health education from Loma Linda and has spent the last 12 years working in the Inland Empire and High Desert, empowering youth and families to overcome health and social inequities. That sounds really good. I'm excited about hearing your presentation, so the rest of the time is yours. Oh, wait, we have to have prayer. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today and to experience this presentation on gardening. And it's not just about gardening, it's about community. It's about crossing from childhood to adulthood and being in touch with the earth. Bless us as we experience this presentation today. Be with Siquem as he shares his expertise with us. In Jesus' name and for his sake we pray. Amen.
Hi everyone, how are you? Staying cool in here? It's hot out there today. But well, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity that I get to share about some of the things that I'm passionate about, and in hopes that it inspires others to also want to be involved with the outdoors. And that's something that we're super passionate about with our family. We just went camping last week, and we love nature. We think nature is important. And so today we're going to share a little bit about how nature connects us to each other, right? But it's more than just that. It connects us to God. It connects us to others. And I'll share a little bit about why it's important, and talk a little bit about what gardening is. Gardening is part of nature, but I'm no expert I'm no master gardener by any means. And so when we're talking about gardening and the outdoors, it's a way to really learn from each other. And what I've learned is gardening and the outdoors is a way to learn from each other. And so for today's presentation, I like to be interactive, so feel free to ask questions, jump in, I'll ask questions, so it's more interactive than anything else. But yeah, I am grateful for this opportunity. Our topic is rooted in connection and the social power of gardening and community, and how does community gardening and nature connects us. And it's something greater than just us. And so with that, we'll jump in. I'm going to go back and forth here between my screens. But when we talk about gardens, garden is just the excuse to connect, right? And we all have our individual gardens that we tend to. And when you think about a garden, what comes to mind when you think about a garden? Anybody? Dirt, okay. What else? Yes. Growing things, yes. Plants. Work, yes, a lot of work. The sun, the heat, right? So a garden is more than just, a garden is made up of a lot of different things, right? And it's not just you going and watering, right? It entails a lot of work. There's a lot of plants. There's a lot of things that actually come from a garden, right? Like you end up having to maybe pull some weeds once in a while from your garden. Maybe little critters, little bugs that eat your plants, right? You have to deal with that as well. So there's a lot. There's a lot of different components that make up a garden, right? But a garden, what makes it beautiful are those different components, right? And when you think about your garden and what you're building is, we all have our gardens. And I'm going to talk about physical gardens, but also going into what that means to us as a community, right? And so I want to share a little bit about my garden. And this is my garden right here. It's my family, right? Just like our gardens are made up of different components, right? Our gardens, the community that we are part of, incorporates a lot of different people as well. There's a lot of different components that each of our garden have, right? And so I'm grateful to be able to have that garden that I tend to, right? That is my family, my kids, and the things that I'm able to do. And so when we're talking today, we're going to be diving into the power of community and why gardening is important, but why nature is important. And so there's a lot of different things that, we could talk about, and we could talk about this topic for a lot of different hours and presentations on this. But, just to focus, my vision for today is to really cultivate a meaningful connection with through family-centered gardening experiences that nurture nature, strengthen relationships, and grow thriving, resilient communities. That's my vision. And really, the family-centered experiences is what really drives me to talk about this more and to share this, because I've experienced positive and good experiences while out in nature. And I hope that this experience that I share inspires you to also consider nature and the outdoors. And my mission is really envision a world where every family in our community, regardless of background or space, finds belonging and connection through gardening, growing not just food, but hope, unity, and a deep relationship with the land. And so ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, garden is just the excuse, right? Nature is just the excuse, that the avenue, if you could say, to get us to our goal, which is to really build these connections with each other. And hopefully we are able to develop that through these relationships that we have. So talking about nature, just some questions to consider as we're talking about this. How do you connect with nature? And if you guys have an answer to that, how do you connect with nature? Yes. Hiking? Perfect. I love that. Yes. Huh? Being outside? Yeah.
Feet on the ground.
Okay. Yes.
So you can get grounded.
Okay, good. Sunset? Yes.
Just working outside on the yard.
Yeah. Easy. Yeah. Yes. Very simple things. And what's nice about nature and what we've learned about nature is that it's very accessible. And I think God made it that way for that reason. I think it's a very accessible thing that we do because that we can do because it was meant for us, right? And so nature is there right outside our doors, literally. So what comes to mind when you think of a garden? I think we talked about that a little bit, right? There's the different components, but anything else that comes to mind when you think about a garden, your garden?
Types of garden, for example, you can have a flower garden.
Oh, what garden?
You can have a flower garden.
Okay, yes.
Just to look at,
Mm-hmm.
or you could have a garden to eat.
Like herb garden, yeah, like herbs, even just,
Medicinal garden.
okay, mm-hmm. Good, okay, so different types of gardens, yes.
We have a garden that helps bees to get nectar.
Yeah, okay, yes, so very specific for animals. Okay, so when you think of gardening, you think of creation in the very beginning. Good, okay. Yes.
I think a garden is one will produce fruit, you know.
Okay, so fruit, yeah. No, that's true. And I think we all, when you think of garden, what comes to mind is essentially what you've learned or taught or what you grow, what you're passionate about, right? And so there are different types, right? And so there's no right or wrong. But, you know, garden, as I said, leads us to community. So how can the outdoors help us build community? What do you think? Yes.
Working together,
Okay, yes, working together.
Sharing.
Mm-hmm. Sharing, yes.
Interacting with the wild animals.
Oh, that's good.
Trapping them and
Ah.
feeding them to the ravens.
Yes, okay.
Studying the process.
Hmm.
In other words, components like light and water and soil. And
Yes.
chemicals.
Uh-huh.
You know, when you're going to do a garden, you have to figure out what you need. And it involves many things.
Yeah. Okay. No, and that's true. And yeah, there's different components of gardening and just really nature, and there's so many lessons that we talk, and we'll talk about a little bit about that. But I like what Martin Luther King Jr. says, "For in the true nature of things, if we rightly consider," he says, "every green tree is far more glorious than if it were made of gold and silver." Right? When you think of gold and silver, right, it's valuable, right? It has value. It's something that if I were to walk and I found a little gold nugget, and I went and somebody, refined it and really made it, it would be very valuable, right? But gold has its value because we've given it value, right? Silver has its value because we've given it value. It's something that we cherish. It brings, maybe wealth, right? And so there's value in that. But what Martin Luther King Jr. is saying, if you think about it, the tree could be far more glorious than if it were made of gold and silver. In other words, what he's saying is, where you put your value is what makes it, glorious and amazing, right? And so if we put our value in nature and the outdoors and green, then that could become the most important thing in our lives, right? And the things that we learn from nature are just really, really valuable. And so that's kind of what I want to change our focus is, there is good things that come from nature. And so there is this value in that and lessons that we could take from it. Yes?
Not only that, the trees give us oxygen.
Yes, true. Mm-hmm.
That's more precious than gold.
True. Yes. Yes, 100%. So I want us to think about these questions. How are we connecting with nature? What comes to mind, and how are we connecting with other people when it comes to gardening? So gardening is just more than plants. As we mentioned, gardening grows relationships, peace, and joy. Gardening or the outdoors teaches us life skills through nature. It heals our minds and brings people together. There's so many things that we learn from nature, and so many things, positive things that it does for us that we ought to really make this a priority or something that's a priority in our lives. In John 13:35, we read that by this shall men know that you are my disciples if you love one another. We talked about the connection. Somebody mentioned that making that connection with other people. That's ultimately what we're trying to get to, is to bring people together, to build that community, that connection that we should have with others, right? And there's just so many things that we learn. There's studies that says that spending time outdoors has positive impact on our mental health. Being outdoors reduces stress and improves our mood. There's studies that have shown that being outside enhances our cognitive function, lowers our risk of psychiatric disorders, improves mindfulness, we get better sleep. And just 2 hours per week, we learn that spending at least 2 hours in nature is associated with improved health and well-being. Also, about 20 to 90 minutes in nature appears to particularly benefit our mental health. And just 15 minutes a day recommends aiming for at least 15 minutes outdoors each day. This is what is recommended. So there's so many other factors that are there that improve our health. So sunlight, exercise, the type of nature. And so there is a positive thing that nature brings. But ultimately, it builds that connection that we have with others. So reconnecting with the earth, nature or gardening, being outdoors, slows us down. It brings us that peace that maybe the world or our work or things that we are constantly dealing with doesn't bring us, right? And so it's good to slow down. It builds awe and respect. I like what you mentioned, Pastor, about the process. You end up learning the process of things, right? You learn things that you may not have noticed before, just by pausing and reflecting on that. And so I don't know if many of you have been to the mountains or just seeing the trees or just going out. You are in awe. It really is amazing, just the things that nature brings. And it does bring that respect towards nature. It helps us care for our planet. I think we see how fragile things could be. And we learn that there are things that we need to be doing to protect that, right? Because if we don't protect the trees, or if we don't protect, the plants or the birds or the bees, as simple as that may seem, then how are we going to care for others, right? And so it brings this respect for our planet. It strengthens our love for others, and ultimately it connects us with God. And I like how it's put in Job, chapter 12, in verses 7 to 10. When we're talking about nature, Job says, "But ask the animals, and they will teach you, the birds of the air, and they will tell you, or speak to the earth, and it will teach you. And the fish of the sea will declare to you, who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind." I think that's beautiful. In his hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. It's like we're all connected, right? And God ensures that nature connects us and binds us all together. And so to say that, we're not going to connect with other people because I could do it on myself is really, in a way, going contrary to what we've learned here, right? Of, God bringing us together. And so I think here in our society today, we are very, it's easy to just want to do things on our own, right? It's very easy to want to just work by myself, be very independent. Though independence is not bad, it's a good thing. It's just that independence tends to lead sometimes to us just kind of neglecting the work of others and just wanting to do it by ourselves, right? But what God is teaching us is, it's all connected. The hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. When you think about the breath of life, right? That's God-given, right? That's coming directly from God. And so that's something that, we could learn from nature. And so it's really going back to, why is this important? Yes, it's good for our health. Yes, it's something that we ought to learn because it's healthy for us, but ultimately it's really bringing us closer to God, which is amazing. Gardens build the community. It's where neighbors come to collaborate. Gardens are gathering places and encourages mutual support and belonging. The gathering places, this is, if we take the time of what, that community that could come out of coming together at a community garden, this is where you start learning about our community, right? A church is a gathering place, right? We have individuals that come from different places to worship in a place. We come, we share differences, we share opinions, but ultimately here we're here for a purpose, and that is, to serve God, to praise God. Gardens provide that sanctuary as well. Gardens provide a place where we could connect with each other, which I think ultimately is our calling. And if we listen and if we're present, we get to learn from our community. I think when we're put ourselves in those places to be out in nature, we really open ourselves to others, and others open up to ourselves. I have a privilege of leading a community garden down in San Bernardino where I work, and it's pretty amazing. The community that we're trying to build, our goal there is to build a community where families could come and feel have a space where their kids could run around and learn about nature. It's a place where parents could come and learn about not just gardening, but learn about different things that other individuals know about, whether that's gardening, whether that's how to, make certain foods out of certain fruits and vegetables that come out, or veggies. And so it's a place where families connect. And so if we let ourselves to be part of these communities, I think we could learn a lot from each other. And church, again, provides that, but having the opportunity to do that in green spaces, I think it's very meaningful and enriching experience that I would like for all of us to consider when we're thinking about a green space and connecting to nature. So the mutual support and belonging piece, I think, goes a long way. Not a lot of people, maybe in our lives, share those values. Maybe some of us learned or came into gardening or wanting to love the outdoors maybe it stemmed from a desire to do that. But that's the point. It's to trying to share those values and share that experiences with the next generation, right? And I hope that we all have that connection and that we're growing together. And the love for gardening and the love for passion stem from my mom, who is in this picture here. That's my mom and my oldest, Jeremiah. My mom passed away 2 years ago, but something that she taught me from very little was to have this love for gardening. And my mom was one of those individuals that loved to garden, but she didn't just love gardening, she loves outdoors, and she loved plants, and this is what she did, this is what she loved. And the love that I have for camping and all the things that I'm doing stem from her. And that's what we're trying to get to, is how do we share what we love with our next generation? How do I teach my kids to want to love nature? And my mom didn't do that by teaching me, by like, hey, let's sit down and learn about gardening. She just showed me what that was, right? Being outside, going on hikes, going camping, these things were things that I learned to love, and these are the things that we want to pass on to others. So connecting, the connection throughout generations, right? I want to be able to teach my kids the things that my mom taught me and what our parents taught us, to be able to pass those on. Gardening or growing together also builds curiosity and energy. I see my kids when we go camping, and they're connecting with nature, just the curiosity, those questions that come from just being outdoors. How tall is this tree? Why do you think this came about? What about these birds? What do you think? Like, just so many random conversations that come from just being outdoors, And so you put yourself in these situations to really build that curiosity and to build on that energy. We create a living memory space. This is really just sharing the things that are important to us, sharing those things with our grandkids, with our kids, and really building healthier communities for the future. Ultimately, that's what we want, right? If there's histories of illness in our families, we hope that with the things that we learned, we could change that for the next generation. And so it's really building those building blocks for the next generation. And I hope that after today, you're inspired to at least consider, if you haven't already, to see the value in these green spaces and to being connected and to being outdoors. So it's not just about veggies, right? Because veggies are good and veggies are delicious. But ultimately, being outdoors is about empathy. It's about working as a team, having joy, belonging, and to be proud of the work that we're doing. It's more than just coming together. It's really just building this out. So how do we start with gardening? How do we develop that desire to want to be outdoors? And it's really simple. And like what we shared right now is, just being outside really connects us with nature, right? And it doesn't have to be something that we have to go to the mountains or do something, expensive thing. It's really simple. And so it's really just starting from very little. And some things that I've learned is really just starting small. We grow heritage crops, right? We grow things that are common to us. What are things that I love to eat? Oh, I really love, I don't know, elotes. There you go. Yes, grow some corn. Learn. It's really basic, and it's really just a way to connect. And so it's really a cultural thing. It's a personal thing. Those things that are important to us. I may say, hey, my family is background come from Mexico, right? So there's a lot of chilies and peppers and things that my family is accustomed to. But where's your family from? What are some things that you grew up eating or learning? Those kind of things are what really drives this forward. And it's really grasping to those things and kind of building on those. Telling the stories and sharing recipes. I don't know how many of you maybe have a family recipe that's been passed down from multiple generations, that stays in the family. Those kind of things are important, right? It builds that community. And really ultimately is nurturing what inspires you. What is your passion? What are something that you really love doing? And it's nurturing that and passing those along. And I feel that once we, that comes through when we share it with other people. When you're passionate about something and you really nurture it and you grow it, people see that. And that's a beautiful thing to learn. So it's really starting small and dreaming big. Margaret Atwood. Margaret is a novelist, writes books, has written a lot of different works. She says, I love what she says, in the spring, at the end of the day, you should smell like dirt. Simple, right? Just go outside. It's really just that. But we do live in a climate that is very harsh, unfortunately, here in the high desert. And that's not to say that we can't grow things here, because we can, and maybe many of us do. But really it's just understanding really our environment. And, because we do live in a harsh environment, there is a lot of different things that we, ought to learn, right? About, drought-tolerant plants and things that we could grow. So if this is your first time learning about gardening or want to be outdoors is really just something that's simple, but learning about those things that make up our community will allow us to then, build on that. But, we do live in a drought, in a place that, is prone to drought. So there's a lot of plants, that we grow out here in the desert. There's a lot of native trees, native plants. And what's nice about plants here in the desert is that they thrive naturally without excessive watering. And that's beautiful. We're actually trying to redo part of our yard, and we're thinking about using a lot of native plants that are native here for that reason, right? Because we have grass in our house, which is good for the kids, but it's so hard to keep alive. And that's just because it's not natural to this area, and you deal with those consequences when you're trying to keep a lawn in the middle of the desert. You're gonna use a lot of water, right? But yeah, native plants, containers, raised beds, that is something that I've learned works really well here in this area, is having raised beds that you're able to enrich the soil in ways that you might not be able to do when it's just on the ground. Planning weekly family garden times, that's something that we could do as a family, starting with our own families. If there is a community garden, starting one or joining a group. I think we had mentioned that the church here has a little plot for a little garden area. That's beautiful, starting something like that at a local church, at a local community garden, really allows to build this community. And finding alternative garden ideas. This is a way that we could grow things without, not like the traditional way, right? I love working with wood and building a lot of different things out of wood. That's just kind of my hobby. And one of the things that I see a lot is like people making garden beds and things out of like old wood or pallets or really random things, and it's really cool to see that. So there's really creative ways to be able to grow our own gardens if we wanted to find alternative ways to do it, and really connect with the outdoors that way. So small steps, big growth. We don't have a yard, that's not a problem. If we don't know how, we're here to learn together, right? And the biggest one that comes is, I don't have time to go out, or I work, or everything. But every minute counts, And again, it's not about making this elaborate, you're going out in nature for 10 days, right? It's every minute counts. So whatever we could put and dedicate to connect with the outdoors is very meaningful. And so again, we're not here to learn. It's not an individual process. It's a learning and community experience. Space might be an issue for some of us. If that's the case, there is alternative ways to be able to connect. Another thing that I wanted to talk about and just share is the connection that nature does with God, and it's really just a reflection. Nature is a reflection of God. What we learn in nature, it's an attribute to God. So the intricacy, the beauty, and the power found in nature can be interpreted as a reflection of God's own attributes, such as the creativity, the wisdom, and the power. So, how do we connect with God through nature? It's really mindful observation. So taking time to slow down and truly observe the natural world can lead to a greater awareness of God's presence. Spending time outdoors is an engaging in activities like hiking, gardening, or simply sitting in a park can create opportunities for reflection and connection. Learning about creation, understanding the names and characteristics of plants, animals, the landscape can deepen one's appreciation of God's creation as well. And creating a space for remembrance, establishing a special place in nature, like a garden or under a tree, can serve as a reminder of God's presence and love. And bringing nature indoors, incorporating elements of nature into one's living space, can also foster a sense of connection and peace. I love visiting my mother-in-law's house and all the plants that she has indoors and how she keeps them alive. It's nice, right? Especially in harsh weathers. Oh, my father-in-law. And just the plants that grow indoors. And so it's just, you see that, right? And we could easily do that also in that kind of setting. But there is a lot of opportunities that we have to grow and connect. But how do we get inspired? And there's a lot of different resources. I didn't print any of them just because of paper and how much, but we could easily share some of these resources. And there's just a lot of different things that help us get started, right? And it's very simple. I found, for example, this one. It's a spring-summer planting calendar, and this is really great to follow because it gives you pretty much a guide. Depending on the region where you live, there's also guides on what you can or should grow depending on where you live. For example, even Northern and Southern California, even though we're the same state, has a lot of different zones that determine what you can and cannot grow certain times of the year, right? But when you focus more on community, the high desert is a lot more different than the Inland Empire, right? And so even though there's zones that within the area, there's specific zones for like desert areas, right? And so really understanding like where I live, what it is that, the time of the year and what I can and cannot grow, it's really easy to follow a guide. And that's something that I'm happy to share with you all. But again, this is just an example of, for example, April, May, June, probably herbs or something that, you could grow in the area. Squash, melons, usually June, July. But then, for example, if you're talking about like leafy greens, once you get into July, it's really hot, so they probably won't survive. Same thing with maybe some other types of plants when you start going into the winter months. But there's also plants here in the area that we can grow in the winter time, and that's something that I've recently learned. And it's really trial and error, right? When I started our garden at our house a couple years ago, I never grew broccoli, and I learned that broccoli is very, not delicate, but I didn't know when to harvest it, and once it sprouts, it's done, and you have a very specific window when it does. And so once it sprouted, it was just like, I was expecting big things of broccoli, and it was like just a bush that was there, and I'm like, oh, okay. But then came about potatoes, and then I learned that you could just maybe get old potatoes once they start sprouting. You just put them on the ground, and I got a whole bunch of potatoes after that. And just very simple, easy, right? And so there's things that you kind of learn as you go, but the key is to really get started, right? And to really get those tools. And if it's not gardening, again, it's nature. And I talk about both of them because they're both important, right? Garden is something that we may be all doing, but nature and really connecting with nature is something that we could all do. So there's really different ways. And I do have a resource here from Urban Farmers that's talking about specifically California and Southern California. And so there's a lot of different resources that talk about that. So my question to you is, what inspires you? And feel free to share how has nature gardening inspired you? Yes.
For example, you've seen my nopales. I started putting them, planting them, more thinking of it as a fence. I wanted it as a fence for my neighbor, so I put so many of them. I mean, they got so big, and now I get a lot of tunas out of them, cactus pears. And they're just growing. I mean, they're growing, and then the trees we were talking about. This friend of mine that gave us the little trees that I have outside. And thinking how life is fragile with what you all know that's happening now. The person that gave us those trees, since he's passed away, and then those trees came to me. They're all growing in the front of my yard, and now he's gone. So it's just the connection that you're talking about with nature, and it just brings it all.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
My wife, we had 5 raised beds,
Hmm.
and over the years, she grew tomatoes, peppers, onions, cucumbers, and always, for me, the inspiration was the following on Friday afternoon, evening, when I would come home from work, there was always something fresh that she would produce, especially some nice salsa out of the tomatoes. Come home to do it. So then this is how it began and it grew. At the moment we let it go this year, but I mean through the years this is all we have.
Yeah.
We've got a whole area over there to care for that.
Good. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, what Jose mentioned kind of reminded me of my mom too. And I mentioned how she just had a way of keeping things alive. But yeah, she would get random trees or branches from my grandparents' trees and just would plant them, and they would just grow into trees. Like it would be pretty amazing to see that. But yes, that does kind of live on, and I feel that the last question, how can God use nature to build others? I feel that God does speak to us in very direct ways. And one thing that came to mind was, my mom really loved palm trees. That was one of her favorite tree. And everywhere we went, she would, like try to get palm trees because she loved them. And probably a few months after she passed, we were there in our yard just kind of pulling weeds and stuff. And I saw this tiny little shrub that came out. And I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. It's like a little piece of grass, but it's really green. It was just in the dry spot there, like on our yard. And there was weeds all around it. So I pulled the weeds and I left a little green thing. I'm like, oh, we'll see what it is. Just like a little piece of grass. And a few months later, it kind of kept growing, and it kind of had like 3 little sprouts after, like 3 little leaves. And I just kind of left it. And then it started growing a little more. Then those little 3 kind of had little hairs on top. And then it had like this little brown bottom thing. It's like, that looks like a little palm tree. It's like, that's so weird. And then I was like, all right. So then I kind of started clearing around it, and I made like a little thing. And I started watering it, and sure enough, now it's like a little palm tree like this big. And it's been about a year, and it's just growing. And I was telling my wife, I'm like, that's it's pretty amazing. Like I feel that God, even in our pain, in our mourning, like He watches over us, right? And that was just an example. Like I've always learned that, and I always knew that that's what it is. But seeing that was, kind of God saying, like I'm with you, like I'm with you here, even in your pain and your suffering. This random palm tree that grew in my yard. I think it's just a way of God speaking to us. That God is present, and it's a way that God connects with us, and. There's a lot of spiritual lessons that maybe we continue to learn, and it's really just being open to that and knowing that God is there. So kind of the next steps, and moving forward is, what will you grow? What is going to inspire you to really connect? And I believe that we are called to be good stewards. And that's just not good stewards of our money, but our time and maybe the relationships that we have with others. I feel that God connects us to other people, and we're connected to other people, and so we have that responsibility to build each other up. And so we're called to really hold those standards. We're called to tend to our own gardens with purpose and care, right? Physical gardens, but also those communities that we're building with each other. And nature connects us with God and our community. And we've seen that through our experiences that we have. And if we haven't experienced that before, it's never too late to start. It's always a good time to really say, hey, I do want to connect with nature, and finding ways to do that. And I love what Alice Walker, Alice is also a novelist. She was an activist, won some awards in the 80s for her work. In fiction. She says, in nature, nothing is perfect and everything is perfect. Trees can be contorted, bent in weird ways, and they're still beautiful. So I hope that today, after, kind of hearing this, that you're inspired to see God's perfection through the imperfection. So, thank you. Do you have any questions, any thoughts, ideas? Yes.
Have you ever thought about the story of Cain and Abel? You know, Cain was a gardener, obviously, and Abel was a shepherd. And it's like God blessed the offering of the shepherd more than the gardener. The gardener got mad and killed his brother. Do you think there's any deep, psychological or spiritual meaning in terms of these two early occupations? One is caring for animals, and the other is caring for products of the land.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, I haven't thought about that, but yeah, I think. In other
words, would you say that you've been basically talking about the one that would be the gardening, but would you say the same about caring for animals and sheep and goats and things like that?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think one theme that as I was, kind of looking through and research is yes, that community, that connection, that respect to nature, I think goes towards, living things as well. I think animals and nature, I think that's all equally there. To neglect one, I think is missing the point, right? Because you could say, oh no, I'm a thing for nature, but I hate people. It's like, well, that doesn't connect. Or animals, so it's like there's it has to, it aligns. So I think it goes across, and I think God's nature is everywhere.
And just to follow up, and in Genesis, I think it's chapter 2, it says there was a garden, and he put Adam in it, and that was even before he named the animals or created Eve. And he told the man to care for the garden. It's almost like that was to be something that man did. He was to be a gardener. And so is it mandated or is it optional to be a gardener?
Mandated.
Yeah, I think God really calls us to live more than ourselves, right? And I think unfortunately we do see the way things are in the world and the way things it's a very self-centered, right? Very just me, about me. But I think God calls us for more than that, and I think it is something that is expected of us to care for others, to care for nature, to have this connection, because God is always there. It's just a matter of us, like, are you listening? Are you attuned to that, right? Which reminded me about something that I was reading as I was hearing about just the earth has like a magnetic pulse, and so it almost has like a heartbeat, and it's these frequencies that are very low that we can't hear them, obviously, but it's almost like a living thing, right? When recently I saw a video of I don't know, it was generated image of like this pulse of the earth, and it's based off of like the magnetic, but also like tremors under the earth, and every 26 seconds they just kind of like a pulse type of thing. And so when you think about it, it kind of reminded me of just life in general, like how it's all interconnected. And I'm like, man, even in that, the scientific way, whatever that may be, I feel like I see God's presence in that, of like just everything working together for a purpose, right? And I feel that's our calling is really to live for others.
Mm-hmm. What I'm learning now, my mom used to be a really good gardener. You guys know she was the green thumb. She had a green thumb. She wasn't a green thumb. She had a green thumb. And I think I'm becoming more of a gardener myself, just being out there like she would, taking the time to actually nurture the plants, you know, putting the fertilizer, you know, the compost and watering, and then having the anticipation of something growing. That's exciting. Like, ooh, I can't wait for the apples to come or the peaches to come this year. And it's just like how God tends to us with the patience, the spiritual food that we get with the Word. It all kind of just comes together, and God would have us to be connected with nature for that respect. Like, I'm tending to you like you're tending to this plant, and I think that's cool.
Thank you.
I was reading here that Jesus frequently used parables involving plants to illustrate his teachings, you know, like the mustard seed, the fig tree, parable of the sower, the true vine, weeds in the wheat, flowers in the field. So there's a lot of
Yeah, that's something yes. Yeah, just the parables and everything was relating to nature, and it just kind of shows where I feel like it just gives the importance, you know, to nature, you know, and kind of bringing us back to that. But yeah, thank you for sharing that.
God made us in this planet so connected to what you're sharing, because even it is already a known fact that if you look at the vegetables, the different aspects of the different, they're better for parts of our bodies, like the tomato for our heart, the all the different, the carrots for the eyes. So I mean, you know, the celery for the bones. So I mean, they look like what they're good for us, and we're just, you know, we call it Mother Nature for something, but we know that God created everything for us to live in this planet with, to provide everything for us. I mean, humanity, for different reasons, greed has, you know, gotten into different aspects of how humanity, in a way, is destroying the planet. Not what God intended for the planet to be. And when we consider that this is our home and it's our only home, I mean, we're not advanced enough for us to leave this planet. This is our home, and we should do our best to tend for it. As you know, I enjoy the drive when I would come from LA. Instead of going towards Palmdale, I would go through Ryewood. I just love that drive. There's so many big trees up there that we don't know are there. A lot of us don't know that all those big giant trees are up there in the mountain, you know, but just going through them, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I felt connected with nature when I drove through there. So I just love it. And then with the experience that we had as a family, you know, traveling and seeing all that, is just so good for us. It's really healthy for us.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So I'm married to a gardener, Joyce, and my dad was a gardener, and he actually developed a fertilizer. He worked for one of the largest chemical companies as a research chemist, Allied Chemicals, and so we always had a gardener, but I never developed a fondness for it because it was too much like work. In other words, I'd go out there and your job is to pick all the weeds, you know. And I'm wondering, you know, something that Jose said about destroying the earth. What do you think of GMOs, chemtrails, and the difference between these huge mega farms and the little gardens?
Yeah, that's a, you know, yeah, that's a lot. But I think it reminds me of I was reading about, you know, just like fertilizers and all that stuff. I mean, I think they serve a purpose, you know, but, you know, some of the consequences, for example, I was reading that we might be the last generation to see fireflies in our generation, like, because they're disappearing. And a lot of it has to do with just habitat being destroyed. I think with us, fertilizer has killed a lot of these fireflies, or the larva that makes the fireflies. And light pollution also has destroyed, because it disrupts their mating patterns, and so they're not mating enough, therefore they're not reproducing. And so all these things, I feel that are good for us, right? We need light, we need all this stuff, have secondary consequences, unfortunately, with nature. I don't know if we can control everything, and I don't know if there's a solution for everything, but I think just being aware of kind of what I can do on my part, I think is important. I think if we give a blind eye to it, I think that's the wrong approach too, right? Just to ignore it and say, oh, well, it's going to be what it's going to be. I think that just gives into the acceptance piece of it, of like, oh, it's going to get destroyed anyway, so it doesn't matter. I hear that a lot of, well, God is coming back, so what does it matter? It's like, okay, like we can't have that approach, but that's the reality. I think we just grow cold to making a difference. So in regards to fertilizer, GMOs, I think there's a lot of, just going back and forth, I think there's a lot of good in that, but I think like everything else has consequences in other areas. So yeah.
Do you have any opinions on any opinion about what they're putting in the atmosphere, chemtrails? Do you think that's just a myth or something?
I don't know. I haven't looked into that. Yeah. I've read some stuff on it, but I honestly don't know. Yeah. Yes.
Just going to what Pastor was saying about those big farms, we also have to consider the population. The population is like all those big farms, they're harvesting our food. And even though now they're harvesting with pollutants, but it's not the same. You go to the store, you see something that's organic, it's gonna cost you more than if you get something that's not. And if somebody doesn't have the means, they're not gonna go for organic, because they're gonna go with what's affordable to them. So yeah, I mean, our world is changing, and really is changing so fast right now that we're doing all we can to just for not only for our own survival, but the world as a whole. And that's why with governments doing what they're doing, like for example the soybean, growing that, a lot of other countries buy that for their animals, to feed the animals. So it's just interconnected. The world is much smaller now based on all this, that we're seeing. And I mean, there's only so much we can do. But ultimately, I think that if you see the population, I shared with the church a while back, where you watch this, the population, how it's growing. And it's amazing how it's growing much faster than it's declining. So it's like, and that's just what's happening with us. And ultimately, we have to produce enough to feed this growing population in all the world. And then and then the issue of politics come into play, where, we're kind of sensing our sensibility for one another, the way I see it.
I just wanted to know, in the community garden you have down there in San Bernardino, how do you reach out to the community? Do you send out flyers, or is it in passing they see your garden and ask? How can you do the outreach through that? And how many people come?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So that community garden down in San Bernardino started about 5 years ago. I think the initial plannings were 2019, then the pandemic hit, and then it was really hard trying to get people out there. But that also actually helped to propel it forward, because of it being outside and just, not being indoors, I think helped a lot as well. But a lot of the families that got plugged in through that were families that were part of some of our other outreach programs and projects. And so they kind of started getting involved and kind of propelled it forward. As those families left, kind of word got around and more families kind of joined. The way right now is we promote it to the community. It's an open space. Whoever wants to join, they can join. And I think word of mouth has been the biggest factor in it, making it grow the way it is. But the community garden down there has about, we have room for about 50 plots, so 50 families could potentially join. It's a 10 by 12 or 10 by 20 space that we give them, or that they reserve or they have. And right now we have about 40 or so that are filled. So we're pretty growing pretty quickly. But again, it's just really sharing with the community, and then the word is getting around. But that garden has potential to grow. We do have a community farm there as well, and that's this garden is funded through Loma Linda University, and the way it a lot of the resources or things that we have come from the university, so families don't have to put a lot to it. We provide the water for everybody. We provide seeds. We have compost. We make compost there from. We make our own compost, and we also get donations for mulch and stuff. So all those resources are available. So it really the goal of that is to make it as accessible and easy for families as possible. And whatever they grow for themselves, they get to keep or they get to share with others. We do have a community farm that, in addition to the plots, is we are able to grow more fruits and vegetables that we either give back to the community. We sell it as low for very low prices, and then some of that, all that money goes back to the garden, and it kind of goes back into it. So we're building all these projects based on that. We have sold it back to the university. Last year we sold a lot of the pictures that you saw there with tomatoes were from that garden. We grew a lot of tomatoes. There was one year that we grew so much tomatoes. I think we sold it back to the university, and they were using it to make sauce and stuff for the students there, and making a whole bunch of stuff. So it was really nice. But again, we're trying to make it as self-sustainable as possible, but it's really just continue to build that community. As new families come, is really sharing the kind of our goal and our mission. And my goal is to hopefully create one of those community gardens up here. That's been my goal. But the weather is it's one of those things that water and having a space for it. But thank you for answering that.
Okay.
I used to pastor the Norco Church, and they had a community garden. They had a big Pathfinder club, and they worked with the church, and they had the spaces people from the community could come in and use them. But they had people who knew how to manage it, and it worked well. Are there many Adventist churches that have projects like that?
Not that I know of. I don't know about Adventist churches that have gardens. At least the ones that the communities that we work with, it's a lot of. There's a few gardens in the area that work there, that have community gardens that we partner with. But I haven't seen any churches that have a garden, or at least that we've been able to. But
we actually considered it here a few years ago. There was a fellow by the name of Keith Allen, and we looked into it, and we were trying to figure out what we would have to do. And one of our big problems was water, because we pay such a lot of money for water, and if we were to have done a community garden, it would have been maybe prohibitive.
Yeah, there's and that's a true, actually one of the main barriers. One of the churches that I was working with, or am still trying to work with, is the Nazarene Church on Hespera Road, which I think was where the Hespera Church used to be at. So that church, the pastors there, they've been a community partner with us for a very long time. We've been able to do a food distribution there with them. We did a vaccine clinic there during the pandemic. So they're a good partner. They have a big piece of land there, like the whole property. They wanted to turn all of that into a community garden. they still want to actually. And so that's something that I'm working with to see if we could do something. But one of the biggest barriers is water, and I think also like resources, someone who could attend to it. It's a full-time job to run a garden that big. Fortunately, we do have some staff at our garden that work there, that, you know, and then we have an agricultural lead that helps with the planting and all of that stuff. But just with them two is really hard work. So you do need somebody that could tend to it, that knows how to manage it and all that. Is it impossible? It's not. I mean, it's really possible. I think if we could do it and find the ways to do it, I think there is always a way to do it. We used to partner with this community garden. It's actually what inspired our garden there in San Bernardino, with this other one that's called Huerta del Valle. They're a community garden in Ontario, and the lady that started that garden has a really amazing story, how she came to it. I think her son was diagnosed with ADHD at like age 7 or 8, and she had gone to the doctor and the hospital, and they prescribed them with a whole bunch of medication and medicines and everything, which she was kind of hesitant to kind of go that route. And she started learning more about, you know, like food in general, and like food access, and how, you know, like diet could play a big role in helping, you know, with some health issues. And so she got inspired to start her community garden. And so she bought a land in Ontario, got grants, a whole bunch of things, and she started this community garden called Huerta del Valle. It's down in Ontario, and her vision was to establish a community garden like every mile. Like that was her goal, you know. Her story, you know, she talks about her family and how she, you know, like was able to turn her life around and like be healthier and do all these different things because of the things that she learned. And so they actually started managing our garden initially, and so they had one of many gardens. And so that was one of the goals, is to try to create more gardens. And I think if we could do that, that'd be really amazing. Being able to create green spaces.
This is my last question. Have you thought much about greenhouses? You know, part of the problem up in the desert is the critters and the insects and everything. In Lucerne Valley, where we live, there's a lot of Koreans who have jujube farms, and they have a lot of greenhouses, big ones, sometimes 100 feet by 20. And what we found out recently is that anyone can get like a government sponsor. If you put one in and agree to do what they say, they'll give you about half of your costs back. So have you done very much with greenhouses, was my question.
Yeah, no, we try to build a greenhouse there in San Bernardino, and it lasted a week because the Santa Ana winds blew it away. So yeah, it lasted very little. But greenhouses are really good. Yeah, we try to do one there, like a big one, and we haven't been able to build one that's like structurally sound for the winds there, just because it's so windy down in that area there in San Bernardino. So that was really, really hard. But no, greenhouses are a great way, and that's when we're talking about like alternative gardening, that's a really great way. Especially with the heat here, I mean that helps, you know, contain it, you know, with water evaporation, all that. In cold climates too, specifically, I think it's a great way, especially up here.
You can put in fans too.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great ways, and they don't have to be big. I mean, if I had the space in my house, I would do it. Maybe I'll start at my in-laws' house, a greenhouse there or something. They have the space, but but yeah, no, that's thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, great alternative.
Any other questions? Anybody want to share about their garden experience?
I just wanted to say our neighbor next, of course it's next door, right? She's my neighbor. She was telling me she got cancer, and the only thing that it was therapy for her to go and water her plants And she says that really cured her. Just by doing that, so it's, looking at her garden and how beautiful it was, and she spent a lot of time on that. And she says that was my therapy, and she's cancer-free now.
Yeah. Same neighbor that she's talking about. When we moved to that house, they used to grow chiles next door. They're Armenian fellows. So he would grow chiles, and then he would sell them to stores in Glendale, because there's a big community of Armenians in Glendale. The thing is that out of what he had there, I don't know how I ended up having something like, I have a flower, my roses in the front of my house. Somehow a plant of chile started growing right there next to the chiles that they had. Yeah, and I started getting a plant of chiles there.
Grapes. They love the garden.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I appreciate you all being here. And again, I'm no expert, but I'm always happy to learn. So if you have resources or things, I think that's where these kind of ideas start growing, and sharing. So yeah, hopefully we'll get something going here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's give a nice big hand. And here's a little thank you. Thank you so much for coming. And just a second here. I have to get something up on my phone. Okay. All right. I really appreciated your presentation, and I have learned some ways to grow things without putting them all the way down in the soil, in like buckets and raised beds and all kinds of ways. And what? And hydroponics, yeah. Not very good at that yet, but I'm learning. Anyway, our presenter for July is Dr. Seth Wiafi from Loma Linda University, and his topic is the role of lifestyle in disease prevention, exploring how diet, exercise, stress management, and social connections impact overall health. So that's going to be on July 2. And Dr. Wiafi's daughter, Ajwa, was here with her friends. You guys remember them? There were 3 young ladies, and they did music as well. So this is the father of Ajwa Wiafi. Yeah, you probably...
Dr. Wiafi was one of my professors for my MPH, so...
Oh, good. Yeah, he's a great guy. We know him from Campus Hill Church. I think he's the head elder there now. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to add that during the pandemic, Siquem had a class. It was, and we learned so much.
You want to tell about the class?
Yeah, well, he's the expert, but we learned how to do different gardens if you don't have the space and different things. It was great. How many classes was it? Like 10? Yeah, so he's a great teacher.
All right. Let's see. January, February. When do you want to come back? Seriously, we need to know more about those who want to know about gardening. That'd be nice if next year, because I don't have any openings until January, but maybe before planting season next year. You can come back and give us a synopsis of your, let's see. We have 15 minutes, so can you do something in 15 minutes? Yes, Larry.
I said I'd be quiet, but if a person owned a large parcel of land and they had unlimited water, like a deep well, they could actually set aside a little place for a community plot.
Okay, we have 10 acres, and we have a deep well, and we had the well tested because we have an extra house on our property, and we had to put in another septic system. So company came, they ran the water for several hours, and it was coming in as fast as it was going out. So the well is it's close to 400 feet deep with almost 300 feet of water. Yeah. So we don't have to skimp on our water, but we don't want to rob the cisterns either. It's really, really good water too. So a lot of people in Lucerne Valley have to buy water because they have dirt in their water or it's too close to the surface. But maybe because it's down low or something, I don't know that much about water systems, but I know. So when the people who owned the house before we did, they, about as far as from myself to where you are, had tried to dig a well and nothing. So the owner said, well, why don't we just go over a little bit, and they hit a gusher. So I don't know how they decide where to do the water, but we were lucky. Anyway, that's all for today. So let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this excellent presentation. Help us as we kind of get the global idea of what a garden is all about. It's not just about vegetables and fruit and planting things, but it's about community. And help us to maybe we can join together and grow and have a growing experience, growing stuff together. And to bless each of our properties and help us to be able to find ways to cooperate with nature, to cooperate with the creatures who like to eat the food, and plant little gardens for them so that they have things to eat and they won't take out all of our stuff. So thank you for hearing this prayer, and bless us and bring us back together next month for another awesome experience. In Jesus' name and for his sake we pray. Amen.